In this video, I'm going to show you step-by-step instructions on how to replace the screen on the Samsung S20 FE 5G. To start off the repair, we're going to place it face down on the heat mat set to 85 degrees C for the next 5 minutes. The purpose of this is to soften the adhesive that holds down the back cover. And although I have got this nice heat mat, a hairdryer or heat gun will do exactly the same thing if you don't have one of these to hand. Once the phone's hot to the touch, we can add some isopropyl alcohol around all the edges of the phone just to further soften the adhesive and allow it to soak in whilst we remove it. We can now take a single-sided razor blade, and I always start from the bottom, creating a small gap between the back cover and the chassis, and then using one of these plastic guitar picks, I'm going to insert it a couple of millimeters and just begin removing this back cover from the back of the phone. Just run it along the edge to separate it. If I come across any resistance like I've done here, add a little bit more isopropyl alcohol and then continue working my way around it. Once 3 of the 4 edges are removed, then we can just lift it up and carefully pry it away from the chassis. Now that that's removed, we'll take it to the workbench and begin tearing it down. Now that we're into the inner workings of the phone, we can get a crosshead screwdriver and remove the 9 crosshead screws that hold down this plastic shield protecting the logic board of the phone. Don't forget, if you like repair content just like this, subscribe to our channel. I've literally got hundreds of repair videos just like this one, and I'm sure there'll be something in there that you can get some value from. I always find that Samsung screws never stick to my screwdriver, so I'm always left picking them out with the tweezers. Now that those screws are removed, we're going to move down to the bottom of the phone and remove the 7 crosshead screws that hold down the loudspeaker and the plastic shield for the subboard. It looks like I've had a bit better luck with these ones, although half of them didn't stick to the screwdriver. With those screws removed, we're going to take the tweezers and lift up this loudspeaker and subboard cover, and then we're going to move to the top of the phone now, and we're going to do the same thing, prying up on this plastic cover to remove it from the chassis. The NFC antenna is still attached to the motherboard here, so use a plastic tool to remove that, and then we can lift up both plastic shields together and store it safely for reinstallation later. Continuing now, we're going to disconnect the battery and pop out the SIM tray. We'll now go back down to the bottom of the phone and use the plastic spudger to disconnect the screen. I'll use the tweezers to disconnect the fingerprint sensor from the chassis, but just notice that I leave it connected to the subboard there, just making sure that it's free from the chassis. And the last thing that I will disconnect is this little blue cable here. Be careful with these coaxial cables, because if they get damaged, you'll get lots of problems with service and signal. The other 2 red and white ones can stay attached to the subboard, because now we're going to go up to the top of the phone and we're going to pop out the motherboard using the tweezers, and then we'll leave everything attached and just carefully detach it from the chassis. Then use the tweezers again to pry up this subboard and remove it all from the phone in one single piece, just like that. I'm going to put that down safely for later, and the next thing we need to get out is this battery. The easiest way to remove that is to apply a bead of isopropyl alcohol all the way around the battery, and then just let it soak in for 5 minutes so that it'll soften the adhesive that holds that down. Whilst that's softening up, we're going to get the new part out, which is a genuine Samsung part. I'll link where I got it from in the description below, and I'm also just going to check to make sure that I've got all the parts that I need from this chassis and I don't need to transfer anything else over. But I can see straight away that there's a little bracket here, one needs to be moved over, as well as one here. So while that isopropyl alcohol is soaking into the battery, we'll lift up this little bracket. I think this is something to do with the 5G antenna, and then I'll do the same on this side, but this one's held down by 2 small black screws. Depending which version of the screen you got, you might have this little antenna board attached to yours or not, but if you need to remove it, it's removed by just getting underneath it with some tweezers and carefully lifting it away from the chassis, being careful not to break it. I'll just transfer these two little brackets over onto the new chassis and secure down the one with the two screws. Now we've allowed some time for this alcohol to soak underneath the battery, I'm going to take a suction cup, attach it onto the back of the battery, and then begin wiggling it from side to side to loosen the adhesive underneath. You might find that it's a little bit tough, but eventually this is going to pop out of the chassis. Now that that battery is removed, I'm just going to use a plastic pick to iron out any of the little ripples that you get in the back of the battery. Now we're going to continue repopulating the new chassis, starting off with the battery. And I've just realized that we've also missed out the vibration motor from the old chassis, so I'm going to remove that as well by adding a little bit of isopropyl alcohol underneath it and then using the tweezers to get underneath it and pry it away, just like that. And now we're going to take the motherboard and subboard that we removed earlier and place it back into our chassis, making sure that it sits nice and flush and the cameras are insecure. And then we'll move down to the bottom of the phone, re-securing the subboard into place, the fingerprint sensor, untangling these little cables and attaching this screen flex cable. Now we're going to move on to reattaching these coaxial cables, starting off with the blue one, and I always use tweezers to sort of guide it into place and then push down on it until you get that click to know that it's secured. And then we'll thread this one back into this little channel that it goes into all the way up to the top. Now we'll go to the red and the white one. It's marked on the subboard where they sit. If you did remove them, the red one goes at the top, the white at the bottom. Obviously we didn't disconnect these, so it's just a case of realigning them into the little channel or groove that they sit into. And the red one goes in the bottom, the white one on top of that. Make sure that it clips into that little metal bracket, and that means that it won't get snagged when you put the plastic back cover on. And I'm just using the back edge of the tweezers to make sure that it sits nicely into that groove, following it up with the white one all the way to the top. And now we don't want to get them bent or kinked in this top corner, so just make sure that you're careful with these cables, because like I've said before, I have broke these and had to replace them in the past. Now that they're re-secured, let's reconnect the battery now by just placing it down and securing it with your thumb. Now I'm going to reattach this wireless charging coil or NFC antenna and fold over the plastic cover for the motherboard. Then I'll finally reattach these 9 screws that hold down this plastic cover. I'd just like to take a minute to thank each and every one of you who has watched our videos up to date. We really appreciate it, and we also love reading your comments and learning how you got on with the repairs, even the horror story ones. With those 9 screws attached, I'm going to reinsert the SIM tray, and now we're going to move back to the bottom of the phone and reattach the 7 screws that hold down this bottom board. Just a little note while I'm re-securing these as well. I don't usually show it in the videos that we test these parts before we start putting them together, because you don't want to see me turning on a phone and making sure that everything works. But it is very important to test as you're going along with the repair. Now that everything's secured down, I have one final check over everything to make sure that you've not missed any screws. The adhesive was in really poor condition when we removed it, so I'm going to replace it with some Tessa tape. You can use B7000, T7000. I've mentioned it in videos in the past, but I don't like to do that. I am going to make a video with detailed description on how to create your own sort of seals with these phones using Tessa tape. But the basic premise of it is that you apply a length of 5mm Tessa tape all the way around the edges. making sure it fits nice and tight into the grooves, and then use a very sharp blade to cut off any of the excess tape. Once that's done, you just peel back the backing sheet on the tape, and then you can re-secure down the back cover, and it's ready to be used straight away, rather than waiting for glue to cure and things like that. With the back cover now installed, all that we have to do is remove the plastic film from the front screen, turn the device on, and that just about completes the repair. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.